On this episode of The Live Life, we're talking about one of the cooler solutions to communicate your message at a live event, digital signage, and more on The Live Life.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by SDVOE, the platform for networked AV.
This is The Live Life, episode 34, digital signage for live events. Welcome to The Live Life, where we bring you influential guests of the live event community to discuss topics related to the selling, planning, designing, producing, and delivering live event productions. I am your host, Wallace Johnson, where you can find me on Twitter at WallaceCTS. And today I have a guest to talk about digital signage for live events. He is the visual communication project manager for Smart Source, and his name is David Schmerbach. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
All right.
Schmerbach.
There we go. I got to get it right. Cool. So Dave, first quick question for you. Give us a little bit of a background about yourself, how you got into the industry and how you got into digital signage.
Yeah, so I just rolled up on my 9-year anniversary here at Smart Source. Kind of rolled into this company on a fluke. They had just been acquiring a few different companies, and one of my friends worked for what was called Rentsys. And he recommended coming over. We do IT and AV rentals, and they were just looking for some techs. I worked in the bar industry. I was running nightclubs and bars. I was a manager and kind of had that background doing technical stuff, but I also had an education in marketing and graphic design. So when I got over to this company, they were really rolling, coming off of a few different mergers and putting things together. We have 21 offices across the nation. We service the convention industry, event industry in all major cities. So while we rent IT and AV equipment, people started coming for solutions. Now companies are looking for, that's great, I can put a 90-inch monitor up there, but what am I going to do with it? So I had a great mentor who was the senior vice president, and talking with him a few different times, and he was really a visionary where he saw like, hey, solution-based events are where it's really at, where he can give you a reason to do some stuff. So you might be an existing client, but hey, I've got all this other stuff you could do too. So instead of just renting a computer or a laptop or a monitor, we can give you the whole package. So he brought me on the team, and we started producing digital signage. And then as I progressed, we also started doing some social media stuff and dabbling. We have a portion that does registration. We have people that do e-literature, lead retrieval. So there's a whole bunch of different avenues that kind of split off of that. I really concentrate on the visual communications aspect of it.
Very cool. You've been in this industry for a little bit of time now. What would you tell somebody new? What advice would you give them that's coming into the industry, looking at what you're doing, looking at digital signage and events? What advice, looking back from your career, would you give to somebody new coming into the industry?
Well, number one, it's not a 9-to-5 job. That's the big thing. It's, some of my weekends aren't weekends at all. They're work weekends, but you got to be ready for anything. It's the biggest hurdle we have is, when it's a live event, it goes 3 to 5 days, it's over with, you never do it again. You might have the same type of event next year, but it's one and done. It's not something you can continually, like a permanent install in your business where, I want to tweak this today or do something like that. It's, there's a lot of, I don't want to say volatility, but there's volatility in like right up to the live, basically until the last minute ticks off the clock. You're on the clock. So that's the biggest thing, is you got to be ready for, it's just anything can happen. But I would really suggest, have all your bases covered. I think one of the things I would have done a little differently is I would have learned to develop apps, been an early innovator on that. I always dabbled with apps and I thought they were cool. I have a background where I can do web design and I know enough to be dangerous, but I think at this portion, instead of concentrating just on one thing, I want to actually open up my avenues to more and that's what I would tell people is, don't concentrate on just one aspect of it. So in my position, I don't do just the design. I don't do just the development. I kind of handle it all. I handle sales assist and all that kind of stuff. And that's just the nature of our business and my role. So for anyone coming up in this industry, just be prepared. Anything can happen.
No, great advice. Great advice. So let's get a little bit into the topic and talk about digital signage for live events. So when we look at a digital signage system that would be used for live event applications, what components would you say are made up in that system?
So I always break it down hardware, software. We rent, like I have my system is already integrated into our hardware. So I always break it down for them in two different pieces. Honestly, because we're such a big company, we have all kinds of hardware. It really we're agnostic on what I put it on. I try to find whatever best fits that client's needs. So we could do anything from a monitor, 40-inch monitor. I've done 27-inch, freestanding kiosks, all the way up to now we have like 58-inch vertical kiosks that are beautiful. They look great, and then we have 90-inch monitors, video walls, all kinds of cool stuff. So we can put it on anything. So that's the one portion I don't really get into that much is, hardware is hardware. And then when they get down to the specifics, being able to put it up and all that kind of stuff. So, really having knowledge of the hardware, but it's not because we're not a permanent install, it's not the biggest hurdle. And then the software component is the one, because what I really get from people is they kind of have an idea of what they want, and then they see the product, and then it's crazy. They're like, oh my God, I could do so much with it. So, that's the one that really gets me is, I always try to convey the message, and I learned this the hard way through some trial and error. So everyone else can skip the trial and error because I'll give you the hint, which is, I learned this in school, and I guess I didn't pay attention that day. I don't know, but it's what's your main message? Like, what are your 3 component messages? What do you really want to get across to people? And then everything else is secondary. So when I do my events, there's some things that people want to get, their agenda. They want to have their maybe wayfinding, where things are at on a show floor, where things are at in a venue. And then the other stuff is informational based. So those are the big things. And I had a client once that I let people design, I work with their creative team. So I don't have to go through and spend a lot of time learning about their brand and all that kind of, that's wasted time and money for them when they have a creative team that's already kind of done stuff. Mm-hmm. So what I like to do is when I work with them, I give them free reign. I was like, design, here's some templates, things that I've done, design something that you like. So it gets them engaged and it makes them creative. And then I can always be like, well, you design this stuff. So, and then I tell them, give it to me and I'll make it work. Or I'll tell you what we need to fix or what I would do, my professional opinion. And so I got something. And when I looked at it, I was like, my eyes bugged out. I'm like, there's 15 buttons on this thing. I'm like, do we really need 15 buttons? Are people going to spend that kind of time at your digital sign? Or are they going to come walk up, find what information they need, and then move on? You might get 2 to 3 minutes of quality time with them. So we whittled it down, and this is kind of how I do things now. This is kind of like I learned from that mistake, but now I teach people as I go along. And what I mean is, what's your 3 main messages? Let's start with those. Those are the big things. Those are the ones you really want to get to. And then we can have some secondary stuff. And then what I've learned works the best is almost like a screensaver. I use an advertising loop where I call them ads, but they're just JPEGs. And what I've learned in the industry is, you probably learned this at events too, is when you're walking around, people are always asking, hey, what's the Wi-Fi? What's the password? The SSID. How do I get the app? Where's lunch? What's another good one? Oh, if there's an offsite event, where is this? I want some information about that. So this is where my design background comes into play. I'm like, let's do this creatively. A picture's worth 1,000 words. So we run a loop anywhere. An average would be like 8 to 10 slides. And that loop, when it's playing on a digital sign, attracts your eye. Now you look over there and you're like, oh, wow, it's a digital sign with some information. Hey, you know what? I need to find my agenda. Where's my room at? And they go over, now they're engaged. And that's where you hook them. And then the best part is, this is how you sell your sponsors. Oh, by the way, you have sponsors. Now you can put your information up there and you got a captive audience. So that's kind of how I qualify, both the hardware and then the software aspect.
Cool. There's a lot of nuggets in there. So looking from what you just described, the software side seems to be a pretty important piece as it outlines kind of the capabilities of the system and all of the graphical things that you do. Is that something that you have one software that you've used, or have you, evolved to different ones over time, or with a lot of it, is it as simple as PowerPoint? Like how do you kind of look at what software fits, the client's needs from a live event side? Is it something that's, you kind of marry yourself to one, or is it a flexible environment to where you can kind of pick and choose per application?
So we do a little bit of both. I'm kind of married to one, which I use. So what I end up doing is I qualify, like, I'm our first line of defense for our salespeople when they get someone that's like, hey, I'm really interested in digital signs, and our salespeople don't know what to tell them. They call me, and then we'll do a demo, and I just listen. That's the biggest thing, is I listen to their needs, and I direct them to what they're looking for. So if it's a PowerPoint or something simple that our techs in our field offices can handle, we'll do that, and I'll coach them along on what they need to do. If it gets a little bit more involved, where we have an interactive sign or something like that, I have a couple different applications I use, but what I really use the most is who I'm kind of married to is Four Winds. We have a relationships with Four Winds Interactive. I've been using them for 9 years now. We kind of got in on the ground floor with them, so we have a great relationship, and it's really such a great program. I probably use like a third of what it's really capable of doing. They've evolved so much, but there's so many great programs out there as well. We've used, with one client, we use Moxie. We have Samsung monitors. So we've used their internal stuff, and that's something that I'm looking forward to. They've kind of progressed that as well. So I'm looking forward to exploiting that as much as possible, because that's a great system as well. So I just have to be careful because my group's such a small group that I want to make sure we don't go overboard, because then all of a sudden, when you got all these jobs coming in and there's only 24 hours in a day. So,
right.
But yeah, there's so many great things out there. I've dabbled, of course, like with Rise Vision and a few other things. So, it's learn one, but I guess my advice would be, learn about them all and know what the differences are, because, it helps when you're talking to a client. One of the big things I get is we have what we call e-literature stations, and it's something where people can scan their badge and send info out. And those are things that I'm noticing a lot of people are starting to go towards. It's a green solution. You don't have to print your material, and you get everybody's information. You don't have to have a fishbowl out anymore for business cards and then go back through and type that info in. You get it right there on the spot. So, and you find out what they're looking for. So that's a great example of digital, progression of digital signage, how it can be used for being more personable, I guess, is a good response to that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, as you bring up that use case, what are some other more common use cases that you see digital signage used for in live events?
So the big things I get requests for are like wayfinding. That's a big one. Especially when you have big show floors and the ability to highlight like categories of booths based on their products or things like that. That's a good one. I just did work for a client, ADP, and they had an awesome digital signage program. And I've literally progressed with them for 6 years. And from basic static signs into more dynamic static signs where everything changes. And now we've gone into interactive and social media. So social media is another one where people are really getting into what that brings to the table. I cringe because I'm like, I've been preaching social media for years, and no one's like, yeah, it's cool, Facebook. And I talk to my friends. I'm like, no, in the event industry, people are narcissistic to a point where they're like, I want to see my name up on the board up there. And so we do Tableau every year, and we did a big social media board this year, and it was a 3-dimensional LED screen that kind of mimicked their logo, which their logo is stacked bars. So it was stacked high and low, front and back, 3-dimensional. And social media people were taking photos in a photo booth behind it. It was popping up on the screen, and people were standing there all day long taking photos. It was like the highlight, like right when you walked in, and people were taking photos all day long. I mean, they got so much value out of this thing. I mean, it was like a piece that everybody talks about, and they were so happy with it. So, the more creative you can be with digital signage, I mean, some of it needs to be just like if I'm at a registration and, whether it be informational based stuff like, flight boards for an airport, all that kind of stuff, those are good use cases. But some of the stuff, if you can get creative with it, wow, I mean, the value is just there, especially for live events.
So speaking of value, speaking of, the use case of digital signage, you've been at it for a while. You've been, almost 10 years plus now. Is digital signage becoming, more common, or people becoming more comfortable, or is it still underutilized for the number of events you're seeing in a year?
I want to say it's becoming more common if you look at it from a standpoint of, like what I have up right now is a digital sign. It's just a logo up there, but that's a digital sign. So if you look at it that way, I think that's an underutilized case right there, because that doesn't do anything other than create a background.
Right.
For me, I would have something on there, whether something to attract your eye, whether it be some kind of moving video, slight moving video or whatever. But I believe more people are starting to embrace it. I hear it all the time, green solution. I just dealt with a client. They're very, their comment was their industry, they put on a technical conference, which has the, I want to remember how he said it, but it was like, they basically, the tools of their trade are the top notch, technical tools of their industry. That's what they promote. And yet they're doing poster board sessions that are on tack boards, and there's like 200 of them, and it just takes up a whole huge area. And I'm like, why not? My thought process, and this is going way above what I do, but I'm like, why not make that into an interactive park where you could have digital signs with your poster boards and make it more inviting to people? I know it's a medical conference, so I know scientists, and this is not a knock on scientists by any means, but some of them are just like very to the point, and this is what I want to do and what I want to look at. Mm-hmm. But if you make these things more inviting, everybody likes a park, and I'm seeing a lot of those, and that's one of the things we're seeing with digital signs is people are integrating them into their setups and making them more inviting, making it kind of a focal point of certain areas. So people, so it's not just a monitor on a pole stand,
Right.
I think that portion of digital, I mean, we still use them, and we're going to still use them because there are places where, outside rooms and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But if you can incorporate it into your design, I think more people are getting the idea, and they love the green portion of it. And my big thing is I come from the print industry, but as soon as you got to reprint something, costs some kind of money. If I got to reprint, or I don't have to reprint anything, I just change the graphic out.
Right.
So I really think people are starting to embrace it a little bit more. They're starting to learn, you have your early innovators, then you have your people that you'll get that bell where everybody's starting out. I saw it over here. I want to do it over here. And then the more they learn about it, the more it kind of progresses.
Yeah, speaking of you talked a lot about the design element, how clients can use it, are using it. What things can help them in that aspect? Because from my background and dealing with clients on design work, they don't generally start off knowing what they want until you start giving them things, and then they know what they don't want. And then you start to kind of scale into, okay, you don't want that, you don't want that, you don't want that. Great. Now we kind of have an idea of what you want now that we're on version 5 of work. So what are things from a digital signage standpoint that can help clients understand not so much the capabilities, like you can show them like examples of work, but if they're designing the work or having you design the work and you're trying to get that initial, layouts and looks done, what are some things that, could be best practices to help that process not be as painful as design usually is with clients who don't know what they want?
So the first thing I always do is before I get on a call is I ask them for like their website address for the conference. I'll ask them for any graphics that they've already produced for the conference. And, if they've developed an app, usually it's kind of funny because app developers, they got to love their life because they get a long time to develop these things, because they start on these things. And somehow I always end up at the end. They're like, oh yeah, digital signs, let's throw it up there. So what I try to tell them is, let me take a look at this stuff first. And then I tell them what I like and how, what we can incorporate. And I'm like, and then I really help them out because I ease people are always nervous coming up to the last portion, there's a lot of stuff going on. And what I tell them is, I'm like, you've already got these graphics produced. Let's put this together. And like I said before, I get with if I'm fortunate enough they have a graphics team, I'll get with them. And I'll be like, I'm going to save you a lot of time. You already have this stuff produced. Let's, repurpose it. And then I'll give them some examples of what I've done in the past. And, like I said before, visually, let them take a look at it and be like, what do you like? What do you don't like? And then so I kind of, instead of designing something, being like, do you like this? Do you like this? I show them what I've done. I said, which ones do you like the best? And then let's go from there. So I use like a lot of my older projects. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I have to limit myself because I start to get in a rut where I'm like, man, everything's starting to look the same. But to them, it's original. But to me, I'm like, man, this is the 5th one I did like this. And so for me to be creative, sometimes I want to change them up. So I'll change up some templates that I'll do. But normally, I mean, if someone's like, man, I just want to do an agenda and a wayfinder and some informational base, I'm like, oh, I have a sign right here. Yeah. I have some signs that I show them, like, to new clients. I'm like, oh, here's my Mac Daddy sign. This is the one that took me a long time with I worked for McDonald's a few years back, and I was like the art director for a McDonald's creative team. It was like the greatest job ever, but for me personally, to learn their brand and their requirements of their brand, it might have taken me, I don't know how many countless hours, but to have them at my disposal, be like, can I do this? And they're like, oh, absolutely. Or they're like, no, you can't do this, but here, we'll send it to you. And they would redo it for me. So it was awesome. But I'll show people things of that nature, and I'll be like, this is what we've done in the past. Get some ideas and come back to me. Take 48 hours to think about it, discuss with your team, and then come back to me, and let's go from there. So I kind of call it cheating creative but it's things I've learned to make everyone's lives easier, especially when you're on a deadline for an event.
No, you're absolutely right. Like I say, you're generally going to be last in line when it comes to the content needs and direction that needs to be given. So there's not a big window. There's already a bunch of content that's been created, so why reinvent the wheel? But having those templates as you describe, and then the examples of how those templates have been used, definitely speeds up the process to where you're not starting from scratch, and they have a base level idea of what they could do. And then once that dialogue starts going, where they can ramp it up. But speaking of ramp it up, like you talked about how, you suggested with the one of using digital signage, with touch technology to handle the notes of sticky board versus the old school manual way post-its everywhere. What are some, recent advances in digital signage that you've seen, whether they actually been used or in development, of, what technology could be currently done, or, even looking ahead a little bit with digital signage?
So I think the next step, and I mean, I know they're out there right now, are like beacons and things like that. I think, facial recognition, all that kind of cool stuff. I think the next step, I mean, it's really analytics based. When you get something, you get the newest iPhone, you get the newest Samsung phone, everything's cool. Until version 9, when it's the same thing. They don't come out with the same thing every year. They come out with new features. So I'm thinking the integration and the analytics. I mean, why is it worth the money to do this? Especially for a live event. I have had that in the past, where people, and I deal with clients that are multi-million-dollar clients, and I deal with clients that have the smallest budget in the world, and, kind of listen. And those are the ones sometimes where I'm like, listen, you don't really want me, but I can help you still achieve what you're looking to do. You'll just have to do it on your own, or, with a PowerPoint, have their interns or whatever design their own PowerPoint. And then 9 times out of 10, they come back, they're like, wow, that's really we just needed something simple. And they were so overwhelmed, like they had this concept of digital signage and they didn't know where to turn or what to do. So sometimes we turn into a consultant, and while we're still getting their business because we're still renting them hardware, but we're helping them along the way. And then I've had the same people come back a couple of years later and be like, okay, now we're ready for that step, because what it was they had to introduce it and then grow their budget up. And then when they got that kind of money, because they saw the value in it. So, I think the analytics are going to be the biggest things. Social media aggregators have analytics, and that's one of the big things to offer is like, hey, you can see on the back end, I should say we offer to give it to them, and we give it to them, but it's what they do with that stuff. But on the back end, you have, hey, marketing can go exploit this number, be like, here's what happened during the event. Why did things spike at 11 o'clock? Oh, general session speaker, he was awesome. We should have him back. He was worth the money. Those kinds of things, or people paid attention to him. So,
right.
Yeah.
No, the analytics side is definitely a popular topic, especially with the consumerization of other technologies that are starting to push into our industry. So that's interesting that digital signage is that's one of the areas of opportunity and next wave of technology coming in that area as well. So I want to flip the conversation internal a little bit. So we talked about kind of the solution, the customer experience side, how they can start to build, their content and get that created through your team. What skills do techs or salespeople who are trying to sell or support digital signage for live events, what are some of those skills that they would need to be successful?
So I'll start with the sales first. And they're going to kill me when they hear this, but I think the most important thing is just listen. Listen to what their needs are to begin with. And then if you're not an expert on it, go get an expert. Get someone that has the knowledge of it. Like I said, there's communications is in my title for a reason. That's what it is. We're just communicating to people. And I think that's the biggest thing is, listening and then communicating back to them. We hear what you need and here's our solution for it. So that's the one thing. And there's not a lot of, I don't need the salespeople to be technical. They don't need to know how to do it. They just need to know what it does. But I have a great sales staff here where somebody says digital sign, they know enough to talk about it and be like, yeah, where they can qualify and be like, oh, we have a guy, and then they'll call me up and we'll do demos for them. So that's a great asset that I have here. They're not afraid to go, I've got a guy. And they always call me a guru, though. We got to fix that term. I don't know. But yeah, but it's great because, when people consider that, oh, you're the professional in that industry, they'll listen to you. So that's the one cool thing with our salespeople. And as from our techs, I deal with the hardware, so I have guys that are IT, they'll fix my computer when it's broken and all that kind of good stuff if I can't figure it out. AV techs at top of the line in the industry. But sometimes you throw software in front of them and they freeze up. So I have my guys that are open. Those are the guys that'll do anything though. They love a challenge. It's like give them a challenge and you're basically insulting their manhood or womanhood. They're like, no way, I'll get this done. So it's great where they just got to be open-minded. So those are like the two things is just listen to people and be open-minded. But I'm very fortunate to have a company that we have a lot of those people, and we do so many live events. I mean, our motto in the field is every day is Monday at Smart Source because it's what it feels like. I mean, yeah, we get weekends off sometimes, but if you're in the field, it's like you might be 2-3 weeks straight with a day off, if that. So, they understand the challenges, but we also have good things to, references, people that they can call up, and that's me, or we have other guys for other things. But they can call up, and we have a nice catalog of SOPs where they can consult that as well. So I think it's just basically listening. Kind of, I guess one big thing too is being prepared. Not going in blind. So those would be the big things for me. In our industry.
Speaking of not going in blind, somebody who's out there that would say, hey, I want to get into digital signage. We're not offering it yet, so I don't have the internal resources, but I want to go somewhere or do some research to try to get some type of training. To your knowledge, what training or resources are out there that people could go, look into it and go find on their own?
Well, they're going to owe me for this plug, but the Digital Signage Experts Group. So at DSE, which just happened, I was unfortunate I didn't get to go this year, but I went last year. They do training there. You can actually get certified in the industry. One of their big things through all the flyers that I get and their videos is, they tell everybody, if you're even thinking about digital signage for your company or whatever, go to DSE, that's where it's at. Now there are other events out there, Infocom and some other smaller events that they have sections for digital signage. But I mean, the first thing, if you're really interested in, go out there and go to one of those events and go talk to people and see, what people are doing. I mean, some companies do stuff internally. They develop their own web-based, but exploit your talents. If you're good at design, let them, let people know, hey, I'm really good at design. Or if you're good at development on the back end, scripting and all that kind of stuff. Those are the things you really need to exploit. But there's also freeware out there where you can start and practice on your own. And everyone's got a monitor. Well, I shouldn't say everyone has a monitor at home, but 99.9% of Americans have a monitor at home. And if you have a computer, you have a digital sign. Hook it up and you can do it right at home. But that's the one cool thing. And you can't say people don't know what it is anymore because it's everywhere, especially if you go to Las Vegas. I mean, if you don't know what digital signage is, go to the Las Vegas Strip and you'll be inundated with digital signs. So, but I mean, the big thing is, I don't know. I should probably do this, but I've never really Googled, is there, a tutorial for digital signage? But I'm sure there is. I mean, there's tutorials for everything. So, some of the companies out there, just go on their websites. I'm sure they have tutorials on what they do. Internally, my company right now, we have a client and they wanted to use bright signs. And so we brought bright signs in, players in. And a few years ago, I tried to get these things in for different reasons. I wanted to do abstract video walls, but they've progressed so much with their software. We have one sitting at my desk right now that we're playing around with. We're trying to see, hey, what are the capabilities and can I use these for something else versus what I'm using Forwinds for? Are they something I can use in tandem? Is one better than the other? Those kinds of things. So, I know a lot of softwares have free trials. Mm-hmm. So that, those would be the things. Go out and, start with the freeware first and then see if it's something you like. I mean, if you're really good at web design, you could probably design your own. I know everyone's getting away from Flash, but Adobe Air. I've seen people use Adobe Air for stuff, and I'm not going to say it's the wrong way or the right way. It's their way. So.
No, great info, great info. So we're going to wrap up with what I call the final 5 on live, some more questions about Dave. So it's just going to be a quick rapid fire, 60 seconds to answer these 5 questions. And here we go. So who outside of the industry has inspired you the most?
Probably my parents. I'm originally from Iowa. I live in Orlando. I lived here like 20 years now. But I come from a big family, and my parents were hardworking, kind of like the average middle American family. Both of them had jobs, but they worked hard. But what they kind of taught me was, there's nothing wrong with an honest day's work. If you ever want to punish your kids, you know what you can do? I'm going to tell you right now, it's the worst thing I've ever done in my life is bale hay. And in high school, you're a know-it-all, and I thought I knew everything. And my dad's like, cool, go out to friend's family farming. I got you a job for the summer. It was baling hay. I think I lasted a week, and I'm like, no way. I get your point now. I understand. So the hardest things, I applaud farmers because it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. But just their work ethic, but they also taught me to enjoy what life gives you. And, they would take me. I was very fortunate as a child to travel a lot too. So.
Oh, very cool. You've traveled a lot on the road, doing shows all over the country, I'm sure. So what is your favorite place that you've eaten while on the road?
Oh, man. I have places for different cities. So, and, I can't say I have one favorite place in each city because there's so many different things. And people in my company actually call me and stuff. You know what? I cheat. I'm not going to lie. I cheat. I go to diners, drives, dive, that Guy Fieri show. Yeah. I've watched that. I'll give my hint. What I do normally is, when you go to a city and you've never been there before, you're like, hey, what's your top 10? You look it up. Never look at what's required or what the top 10 are. Always look at what the locals tell you to do. So, whether it be Vegas, actually, one place I go in Vegas that's a stop every time is Naked City Pizza, and it's at a dive bar called Moon Doggies. There's your shout out for you guys. But it's a dive bar. But what's cool is we go. I think what the best part is it's I just don't go there by myself. Right, I go with my guys we work with. It's team building. So those are probably the best places. Is we go to some places whether it's I like fancy restaurants, they're great, but sometimes just relaxing dive bars with your friends that have great food. So I'll give you a list sometime of all my places from each city.
There we go. There we go. We'll post that on the site. So you've traveled a lot, number of different cities. What is your favorite city that you've traveled to on the show?
Well, so I live in Orlando, which is probably one of the most transient cities in the world. We've had people come and go. I've lived here 20 years. I worked in the bar industry. So I have friends all over. So I can't say I have a favorite city either because I'll go in waves where I'll go, I have friends that live in Vegas. I love going to Vegas, and it's not being the tourist on the strip, which is fun because there's so much people watching and things to do on the strip. And, but it's the things outside the city. I like to, if I can, I like to explore a little bit where, if you can get a day off after the event before you have to come home and do things, whether, drive to the Grand Canyon, but do something. And I think that's the one thing I would suggest to business travelers is always try to take time for yourself. I know it's not feasible every single trip, but, if you can do something, something little anyway. So, but I would say, I just been going to Vegas for so much. I like San Francisco too because of the history and I got a lot of friends that live there as well. So, at least it serves the purpose. You get to visit some friends, spend some time with your friends, and then afterwards, they always have the lowdown on where to go locally too. So
Cool. Favorite movie of all time?
PCU.
Cool. And then last,
have you ever seen that one?
I have not seen that one.
It's an older movie, probably from the 90s. It was called PCU. Had David Spade in it. Had I'll think of their name. The guy from Entourage, Ari. Can't think of his name. Had John Farber in it. But PCU is Port Chester University, or politically correct university, and it was making fun of the atmosphere of being politically correct. And the older it gets, the more it pertains to our society. It's just a funny movie. So
sounds like something I'll be watching this weekend. And lastly, if you did not get into the AV industry, what would you be doing?
I don't know. That's a good question. I've worked in hospitality a lot, and but I think I just kind of tired of that, and probably web design or something of that nature. Still IT based, but something like that. I am looking to start developing apps, so that's going to be my hobby for the next few months, I think.
Very cool. Well, Dave, thank you so much for being on this episode of The Live Life. Please tell the audience where they can find you on the World Wide Web and social media. Sure.
So I am located on social media on my LinkedIn page. That's pretty much what I use for business. I don't have a personal Instagram. I use my work one. I haven't been using it that much though lately. Probably need to update that. But the best place to find me is LinkedIn with my name. Very cool. Well, folks, thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Live Life. Be sure you subscribe on iTunes or the RSS feed on AVNation.tv, and to tune into all the future episodes. And we look forward to talking to you next month with more featured guests from the live event community. So thank you so much, Dave, and talk to you soon.